Tommy Rodriguez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked around his small auto repair shop. The old building sat on the edge of town, where the pavement met the desert sand. Paint was peeling off the walls, and the air conditioning unit made more noise than it produced cool air. But this place was all Tommy had, and he loved every greasy corner of it. Business had been slow for months. Really slow. Tommy counted the crumpled bills in his cash register every morning, hoping somehow there would be more than the day before. There never was. The rent was due in 5 days, and he was short by $300. His landlord, Mr. Peterson, had already called twice this week. Tommy knew what that meant. The morning sun beat down on the concrete outside. Arizona summers were brutal, and working in the garage felt like being inside a giant oven. Tommy had grown up here, though, so the heat was just part of life. He'd been fixing cars since he was 16, learning from his father, who ran this same shop before him. When his dad passed away 2 years ago, Tommy took over. He thought he could make it work. Some days he wasn't so sure. Tommy was sorting through old invoices when he heard the rumble of an engine outside. He looked up through the dirty window and couldn't believe what he saw. A beautiful red Ford Mustang was pulling into his parking lot. Not just any Mustang. This was a 1967 fastback, the kind of car that made grown men stop and stare. The paint gleamed like it had just rolled off the showroom floor. Black racing stripes ran down the middle, and the chrome bumpers reflected the desert sun like mirrors. Cars like this didn't usually come to Tommy's shop. Most of his customers drove beat-up trucks and old sedans. This Mustang belonged in a fancy dealership or a car show, not in his dusty little garage. Tommy wondered if the driver was lost and needed directions. The engine shut off, and Tommy heard a car door slam. Through the window, he watched a man walk toward the shop entrance. The guy looked to be in his 40s, medium height with short, dark hair. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, but something about the way he moved caught Tommy's attention. The man walked with purpose, his eyes taking in everything around him. His shoulders were straight, and his steps were measured and quiet. Tommy had seen that kind of walk before, usually from guys who had spent time in the military. The bell above the door chimed as the man entered. Up close, Tommy noticed more details. The guy was in good shape, not bulky but lean and strong-looking. His hands looked tough, like he was used to physical work, but his eyes were what really stood out. They were sharp and alert, constantly moving, taking in every detail of the shop. Most customers looked around casually. This guy was studying the place. "You the owner?" the man asked. His voice was calm and direct, no small talk or friendly chatter. "Yeah, that's me, Tommy Rodriguez. What can I do for you?" The man nodded once. "My car's making some strange noises. Need it looked at and fixed quickly." Tommy glanced toward the window where the Mustang sat gleaming in the parking lot. "That beautiful machine out there? What kind of noises are we talking about?" "Rattling. Sound when I'm driving on the highway. Starts around 60 miles per hour and gets worse as I go faster. Can you handle it?" Tommy had worked on plenty of classic Mustangs over the years. They were popular with collectors and weekend warriors who wanted to feel young again. But most of those cars showed their age. Faded paint, worn interiors, little rust spots. This one looked perfect, like it had been restored by professionals with unlimited budgets. "I can take a look," Tommy said. "Classic Mustangs are great cars, but they can develop issues as they get older. How long have you had her?" The man hesitated for just a second. "Not long. I'm just passing through town on business. Need the car?" "Running perfectly by tomorrow afternoon. Can you make that happen?" Something about the way he said business made Tommy curious, but he didn't ask. Customers had their reasons for being private, and Tommy had learned not to pry. Besides, this job could be exactly what he needed to make rent this month. "Depends on what's wrong with it," Tommy said. "Mind if I take a listen?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out the keys. They were simple keys, nothing fancy, which seemed odd for such an expensive car. Most classic car owners had special keychains or vintage accessories to match their rides. These keys looked like they came from a hardware store. "One more thing," the man said, handing over the keys. "I'd prefer to keep this quiet. I'm not from around here, and I don't need word getting around about my business. You understand? Tommy nodded. Sure, no problem. I don't gossip about my customers. Good. The man reached into his wallet and pulled out several $100 bills. Tommy's eyes widened. He rarely saw that much cash at once. This should cover your usual rate plus extra for discretion and speed. Fair enough? Tommy's mind raced. The money would cover his rent and then some. He could stock up on parts, maybe even fix the air conditioning unit. But something felt unusual about the whole situation. Why was this guy in such a hurry? Why pay so much extra for secrecy? And why did he keep looking toward the door like he expected someone to walk in? That's very generous, Tommy managed to say. But I haven't even looked at the car yet. What if it's something simple? Keep the extra regardless, just get it done by tomorrow afternoon. Tommy took the money, trying not to show how much he needed it. All right, you've got a deal. Should I call you when it's ready? The man shook his head. I'll come by tomorrow around 2 o'clock. Will that work? Sure thing. Can I get your name for my records? Another brief hesitation. David Johnson. The name sounded generic, like something someone might make up on the spot, but Tommy didn't push. He wrote it down on a work order along with the car details. Okay, Mr. Johnson, I'll get started right away. You need a ride somewhere? I could call a taxi for you. No need. I'll make my own arrangements. David Johnson headed for the door, then paused and turned back. One more thing. If anyone asks about the car or comes looking for it, you haven't seen it, understood? A chill ran down Tommy's spine despite the heat. Is there something wrong? Is the car stolen or something? Nothing like that. I just value my privacy. Some people in my line of work prefer to keep things quiet. With that, David Johnson walked out the door. Tommy watched through the window as the man strode across the parking lot with that same purposeful walk. Instead of heading toward the main road where he might catch a bus or taxi, Johnson walked toward the desert side of town. Within minutes, he had disappeared around a corner, leaving no trace except for the gleaming Mustang in Tommy's lot. Tommy stood there for a moment, holding the cash and the keys. Everything about the encounter felt off, but he couldn't put his finger on exactly what bothered him. The man seemed professional and serious, not like a criminal or troublemaker. Maybe he was just a private person who happened to drive a beautiful car. The money in Tommy's hand felt real enough. He counted it again. More than enough to solve his immediate problems. Whatever David Johnson's story was, Tommy had a job to do. He grabbed his tools and headed outside to take a closer look at the Mustang. Walking around the car, Tommy marveled at its condition. The paint was flawless, not a single scratch or ding anywhere. The chrome was polished to perfection, and the tires looked brand new. Even the undercarriage appeared spotless, which was unusual for any car, especially one supposedly being driven on highways. Tommy slid behind the wheel and turned the key. The engine roared to life with a deep, powerful sound that sent vibrations through his chest. This wasn't the original engine, he could tell immediately. The sound was too refined, too powerful. Someone had done serious work under the hood. He drove the car slowly into the garage and positioned it on the lift. As the hydraulics raised the Mustang into the air, Tommy felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He was about to work on one of the most beautiful cars he'd ever seen, but something told him this job was going to be more complicated than a simple rattle. The afternoon sun streamed through the garage windows as Tommy prepared his tools. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly toward the horizon, empty and quiet. Inside the garage, the Mustang waited, holding whatever secrets lay beneath its perfect exterior. Tommy had no idea that opening the hood of this car would change his life forever. Tommy rolled his creeper under the raised Mustang and clicked on his flashlight. The underside of the car was as perfect as the outside. No rust, no dirt, no signs of normal wear and tear. It looked like it had been cleaned with a toothbrush. In all his years working on cars, Tommy had never seen an undercarriage this spotless. Even brand new cars from the dealer had some dust or shipping residue. He ran his hands along the exhaust system, listening for the source of the rattling noise. The pipes were warm from the short drive into the garage and they felt solid. But as he traced the system toward the engine, something caught his attention. The exhaust wasn't standard. The pipes were thicker than normal, and the muffler was twice the size it should be. This wasn't just about making the car quieter. This was serious sound dampening, the kind used on vehicles that needed to run silent. Tommy slid out from under the car and walked to the front. Time to pop the hood and see what was really going on. He pulled the hood release and lifted the heavy metal panel. What he saw made him stop breathing for a moment. The engine bay looked normal at first glance, a classic V8 engine sitting in its proper place. But Tommy had worked on hundreds of engines, and his trained eye immediately spotted the differences. The engine block was definitely a Ford V8, but it had been heavily modified. The cylinder heads were aftermarket pieces, probably racing components. The intake manifold was custom work, and the carburetor was a high-performance model that cost more than most people's entire engines. But that wasn't the strange part. What really caught Tommy's attention were the little details that didn't belong. Several components had markings he didn't recognize, numbers and letters stamped into the metal that didn't match Ford's normal part numbering system. Some pieces looked like they came from military suppliers with serial numbers that started with letters Tommy had seen on government contracts. Tommy's dad had done some work for the nearby Air Force Base years ago, and he remembered those kinds of markings. Military parts were built to different standards than civilian components, stronger, more reliable, and usually classified in some way. What were military-grade parts doing in a classic Mustang? He started the engine again and listened carefully. The rattling was definitely coming from somewhere in the exhaust system, but it was subtle. Tommy had to concentrate to hear it over the smooth rumble of the modified engine. He traced the sound with his hands, feeling for vibrations in the pipes and brackets. 20 minutes later, he found the problem. A mounting bracket near the catalytic converter had worked loose. It was a simple fix. Just tighten a few bolts and maybe replace a rubber bushing. The kind of repair that should take 15 minutes and cost $20. Why had David Johnson been so worried about it? And why pay hundreds of dollars for such a simple job? As Tommy reached for his wrench, his elbow bumped against something, near the air filter housing. He looked closer and saw a small metal box he hadn't noticed before. It was about the size of a smartphone, painted black to blend in with the engine components. Thin wires ran from the box to various parts of the engine, but they didn't connect to anything Tommy recognized. His curiosity got the better of him. Tommy carefully traced the wires, trying to figure out what this mystery box was supposed to do. It wasn't connected to the ignition system or the fuel injection. It didn't seem to control the lights or any other normal car functions. The wires disappeared into the firewall, probably running to the interior of the car. Tommy had seen aftermarket alarm systems and GPS trackers before, but this didn't look like either of those. The box was too sophisticated, too well hidden. Most car accessories were designed to be found easily for maintenance. This thing was deliberately concealed, tucked away where only a mechanic doing major engine work would discover it. Against his better judgment, Tommy decided to take a closer look. He carefully removed the air filter housing to get better access to the mystery device. As soon as he moved the housing, his hand accidentally brushed against the black box. Immediately, the device came to life. A series of red and green lights started blinking in a pattern Tommy didn't understand. Then came a sound that made his blood run cold. A series of electronic beeps, like a computer communicating with something far away. The beeping lasted about 10 seconds, then stopped. The lights went dark and the box became silent again. Tommy's hands were shaking. Whatever he had just activated, it wasn't supposed to happen. The device had sent some kind of signal, probably, to whoever was monitoring it. Someone, somewhere, now knew that the Mustang had been discovered. He quickly replaced the air filter housing, trying to make everything look exactly as it had before, but his mind was racing with questions. What was that device? Who was it communicating with? And most importantly, what had he gotten himself into by taking this job? Tommy stepped back from the car and tried to think rationally. Maybe the device was just a sophisticated anti-theft system. Rich people with expensive cars sometimes installed elaborate security measures. But something about the whole situation felt wrong. The military-grade parts, the hidden communication device, the customer who paid in cash and used a fake-sounding name. None of it added up to a normal classic car restoration. He walked around the Mustang again, this time looking for other clues he might have missed. The license plates were Arizona tags, current registration, nothing unusual there. But when he looked closer at the VIN number stamped on the dashboard, something seemed off. The numbers were correct for a 1967 Mustang, but the metal around them looked newer than the rest of the dash. Someone had worked very hard to make this car appear completely normal while hiding its true purpose. Tommy opened the driver's door and looked inside. The interior was as perfect as everything else. Black leather seats, classic gauge cluster, everything exactly as it should be in a restored Mustang. But when he looked closer at the center console, he noticed something strange. There was a small panel that didn't belong in a 1967 car. It was cleverly designed to look like part of the original dashboard, but Tommy could tell it had been added later. The panel had 3 small switches, each one unmarked. Tommy didn't dare touch them after what had happened with the device under the hood. But he memorized their positions and took mental notes of everything he was seeing. If David Johnson really was just a classic car enthusiast, why all the secret modifications? The afternoon wore on as Tommy fixed the loose exhaust bracket. It really was a simple repair, just as he had suspected. He tightened the bolts, replaced a worn rubber bushing, and tested the system by revving the engine. The rattling was completely gone. The car now ran as smoothly as it looked, but Tommy couldn't shake the feeling that he was in over his head. Every detail about this job felt wrong. The customer who disappeared into the desert, the military parts hidden in a civilian car, the communication device that had activated when he touched it, the mysterious switches in the dashboard. None of it made sense for a normal car repair. As the sun began to set, Tommy lowered the Mustang from the lift and parked it in the back corner of his garage. He wanted it out of sight from the street, though he couldn't say exactly why. Something told him that the fewer people who saw this car, the better. He locked up the shop and walked to his small apartment above the garage. All evening, he kept looking out the window at the Mustang sitting in the shadows below. The car looked innocent enough in the dim light, just another classic automobile waiting for its owner to return. But Tommy knew better now. That beautiful, red Mustang was hiding secrets that could be dangerous. Tommy barely slept that night. Every sound outside made him jump. A cat knocking over a trash can, the wind rattling a loose piece of metal, a truck passing on the distant highway. He kept thinking about the electronic beeping from the device under the hood. Someone had received that signal. Someone now knew where the car was, and that it had been discovered. By morning, Tommy had made a decision. When David Johnson returned that afternoon, Tommy would ask direct questions. He deserved to know what he was dealing with. If the car was involved in something illegal or dangerous, he wanted no part of it. The money wasn't worth the risk. No matter how badly he needed it. But as Tommy would soon discover, asking questions about David Johnson and his mysterious Mustang was about to bring more attention than he had ever bargained for. Forces were already in motion that would change his quiet life forever. The signal from that hidden device had done more than just announce the car's location. It had started a chain of events that would bring federal agents to his door within hours. Tommy had no way of knowing that the perfect red Mustang sitting in his garage was at the center of a national security investigation, or that his accidental discovery of the communication device had just made him the most important witness in a case involving stolen military secrets and international espionage. Tommy woke up to the sound of car doors slamming outside his shop. He rolled over and checked his phone. 6:30 in the morning, way too early for customers. He stumbled to the window and looked down at the parking lot. His heart nearly stopped. 3 black SUVs were parked outside his garage. Not the kind of vehicles you see in his neighborhood. These were government cars, the type with tinted windows and serious-looking antennas on the roof. Men and women in dark suits were getting out, all of them moving with the same purposeful walk he had seen from David Johnson. Tommy threw on his clothes as fast as he could and rushed downstairs. Before he could even unlock the front door, someone was knocking. Not the friendly tap of a regular customer. This was the firm, official knock of people who meant business. He opened the door to find a woman in her 30s wearing a black suit and sunglasses. She was Asian American, average height, with short hair and the kind of serious expression that said she wasn't here for small talk. Behind her stood 3 other people, all dressed the same way, all looking like they could handle themselves in any situation. "Mr. Rodriguez?" the woman asked, though it sounded more like a statement than a question. "Yeah, that's me. What's this about?" She pulled out a leather badge holder and flipped it open. "Agent Lisa Park, Army Criminal Investigation Command, we need to talk." Tommy's mouth went dry. Army investigators. This was about the Mustang. It had to be. What can I do for you?" "We're investigating a stolen military vehicle. Have reason to believe it's currently in your possession." Tommy's legs felt weak. The beautiful red Mustang wasn't just modified with military parts, it was actually stolen from the Army. He thought about the money David Johnson had paid him, the cash that was supposed to solve all his problems. Now it felt like blood money burning a hole in his pocket. "I think you better come in," Tommy said, stepping aside to let them enter. Agent Park and her team walked into the shop with practiced efficiency. Their eyes took in every detail: the tools, the workbenches, the oil stains on the concrete floor. One of the agents, a tall man with graying hair, was already heading toward the back of the garage where the Mustang sat covered by a tarp. "That the vehicle in question?" Agent Park asked, following Tommy's nervous glance toward the covered car. Tommy nodded, not trusting his voice. The tall agent pulled off the tarp, revealing the gleaming red Mustang in all its perfect glory. Even in the dim garage lighting, the car looked magnificent. It was hard to believe something so beautiful could be at the center of a federal investigation. "When did this vehicle arrive at your shop?" Agent Park asked, pulling out a small notebook. Tommy found his voice. "Yesterday afternoon. A man calling himself David Johnson brought it in. Said it was making rattling noises and needed to be fixed quickly." "David Johnson," Agent Park repeated, writing it down. "Can you describe this man?" Tommy described the mysterious customer in as much detail as he could remember. The agent took notes on everything: his appearance, his behavior, the way he walked, even the generic way he had given his name. When Tommy mentioned how the man had disappeared into the desert on foot, Agent Park exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Mr. Rodriguez, I need you to understand something," Agent Park said, her tone becoming more serious. "This vehicle has been used in multiple crimes over the past 6 months. The person you know as David Johnson is not who he claimed to be." Tommy felt sick. "What kind of crimes?" "I can't go into specifics, but this involves national security. The car has been spotted at several military installations where classified information was stolen. We've been tracking it for weeks." One of the other agents, a woman with blonde hair, was examining the Mustang closely. She had put on latex gloves and was looking under the hood with a flashlight. "The communication device is still here," she called out to Agent Park. "Looks like it was activated recently." Tommy's heart sank even further. "I accidentally bumped into something yesterday when I was working on the engine. It started beeping and flashing lights. I didn't know what it was." Agent Park turned to stare at him. "You activated the communication system?" "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to fix the exhaust rattle. My elbow hit this black box thing and it went crazy for about 10 seconds, then stopped." The agents all looked at each other with expressions that made Tommy very nervous. The blonde agent was now photographing everything under the hood with a professional camera. The tall man was examining the interior, paying special attention to the mysterious switches Tommy had noticed in the dashboard. "Mr. Rodriguez, when that device activated, it sent a signal to whoever was monitoring it," Agent Park explained. "They now know the car has been discovered and where it's located. That could put you in danger." Tommy sat down heavily on a nearby stool. "Danger? What kind of danger?" "The people using this vehicle are involved in espionage, selling military secrets to foreign governments. They don't like loose ends." The word espionage hit Tommy like a punch to the stomach. He had thought maybe David Johnson was just a criminal, maybe someone who had stolen an expensive car. But spies selling government secrets? That was the kind of thing you saw in movies, not in real life, in a small auto repair shop in Arizona. "Look, I don't know anything about spies or military secrets," Tommy said, his voice shaking slightly. "A guy brought me a car to fix. I fixed it, that's all. I had no idea it was stolen." "We believe you," Agent Park said, and she actually sounded sincere. "Your cooperation yesterday with the activation signal actually helped us more than you." "No. We were able to trace some communications and gather valuable intelligence." The tall agent approached them. "Agent Park, you need to see this." He was holding what looked like a small electronic tablet. "The modification work on this vehicle is extensive. Someone spent a lot of time and money turning it into a mobile surveillance platform." Agent Park looked at the tablet, then back at Tommy. "Mr. Rodriguez, you mentioned fixing a rattling exhaust. Did you notice anything else unusual about the car?" Tommy told them everything. The military-grade parts, the perfect condition despite supposedly being driven on highways, the sophisticated sound dampening in the exhaust system, the switches, in the dashboard. The agents took notes on every detail, occasionally asking follow-up questions or requesting clarification. "You've got a good eye," the blonde agent said when Tommy finished his description. "Most mechanics wouldn't have noticed half of those details." "My dad taught me to pay attention to everything," Tommy replied. "He always said cars tell stories if you know how to listen." Agent Park closed her notebook. "Here's where we stand, Mr. Rodriguez. This vehicle is evidence in an active federal investigation. We're going to need to impound it immediately, will ye? Also need a detailed statement from you about your interaction with the suspect." Tommy nodded. He had expected as much. "What about the money he paid me?" "How much?" Tommy hesitated, then told them about the large cash payment. Agent Park whistled, softly. "That's evidence too. We'll need to take it, but you'll get it back eventually once the case is closed. How long will that take? Hard to say. Could be months, could be longer. These kinds of cases are complicated." Tommy thought about his rent, due in 3 days. The money that was supposed to save his shop was about to disappear into an evidence locker. But he knew he had no choice. Getting involved with stolen military vehicles wasn't worth any amount of money. "There's something else," Agent Park continued. "The activation of that communication device means the suspects know their car has been compromised. They might try to retrieve it, or they might try to eliminate any witnesses who could identify them. You mean me? Possibly. We're going to recommend you close your shop for a few days and stay somewhere else until we can assess the threat level." Tommy looked around his small garage, the place where he had grown up, where his father had taught him everything about fixing cars, where he had planned to build his future. Now government agents were telling him to abandon it because he had accidentally gotten mixed up with spies. "I don't really have anywhere else to go," Tommy admitted. "This shop is my home and my business." "We can arrange for protection if necessary," Agent Park said. "But first we need to process this scene and get your complete statement." For the next 3 hours, Tommy watched as the federal agents documented everything about the Mustang. They photographed it from every angle, removed the mysterious communication device, and carefully cataloged all the modifications. The car that had seemed so beautiful yesterday now looked sinister, like a wolf in sheep's clothing. A tow truck arrived to take the Mustang away. Tommy felt a strange sadness watching it go. Despite everything, it really was a magnificent automobile. Someone had put incredible skill and craftsmanship into making it look perfect while hiding its true purpose. In different circumstances, he would have loved to work on a car like that. Agent Park handed Tommy a business card. "If David Johnson or anyone else contacts you about the car, call me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself." "What if he comes back this afternoon like he said he would?" "He won't. By now he knows we found the car. People like him don't stick around when their operations are blown." As the agents prepared to leave, Tommy had one more question. "How did you find the car here so quickly?" Agent Park smiled for the first time since arriving. When that communication device activated yesterday, it didn't just send a signal to the suspects. We've been monitoring those frequencies for months. Your accidental discovery led us right to the biggest break in our case. Tommy realized that His clumsy bump into the hidden device had actually helped catch the spies. Maybe there was some justice in the situation after all. 2 weeks passed, and David Johnson never returned for the Mustang. Tommy wasn't surprised. After what Agent Park had told him about spies and stolen military secrets, he figured the mysterious customer was long gone. But Tommy kept looking over, his shoulder everywhere he went, wondering if someone was watching him. The first few days after the agents took the car were the hardest. Tommy had to close his shop temporarily, just like Agent Park suggested. He stayed with his cousin Miguel, across town, sleeping on a couch and jumping at every unexpected sound. The government had taken the cash payment as evidence, leaving Tommy with no way to pay his rent or keep his business running. On Thursday morning, Agent Park called with news that changed everything. "We got them," she said, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction Tommy hadn't heard before. David Johnson and his entire team arrested them yesterday in Nevada. Tommy felt a huge weight lift off his shoulders. So it's over? The dangerous part is, Johnson's real name is Robert Chen. He's a former military intelligence officer who went bad about 8 months ago. He was using that Mustang and several other stolen vehicles to move around the country, stealing classified information from military bases. Tommy sat down at Miguel's kitchen table trying to process what he was hearing. How did you catch them? Your accidental activation of that communication device was the key. When you bumped into it, the signal allowed us to track their entire network. We've been following their communications for 2 weeks, and yesterday, we caught them in the act of selling stolen documents to foreign agents. The irony wasn't lost on Tommy. His clumsy accident while trying to fix a simple exhaust rattle had helped bring down a spy ring. What happens now? Well, that's why I'm calling. The Army wants to meet with you. There's going to be a reward for your assistance in breaking this case. Tommy's heart jumped. A reward? How much? I can't say over the phone, but let's just say it's substantial. Can you come to the federal building downtown this afternoon? Tommy borrowed Miguel's truck and drove to the meeting, his mind racing with possibilities. Maybe he could pay his rent after all. Maybe he could keep his shop open and get back to work. As he walked through the security checkpoint at the federal building, Tommy felt like he was entering a different world. All marble floors, serious-looking people in suits, and an atmosphere of important business being conducted. Agent Park met him in the lobby and escorted him to a conference room on the 5th floor. Inside, 3 people were waiting for him. One was a man in an army uniform with enough ribbons and stars on his chest to show he was somebody important. The other 2 were civilians in expensive-looking suits. "Mr. Rodriguez," the army officer said, standing to shake Tommy's hand. "Colonel Williams, Army Intelligence. I want to personally thank you for your role in stopping a serious threat to national security." Tommy felt overwhelmed. "I didn't really do anything special. I was just trying to fix a car." "Sometimes the most important discoveries happen by accident," Colonel Williams replied with a smile. "Your observation skills and attention to detail helped us solve a case that had been stumped for months." One of the civilians, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, opened a briefcase and pulled out some paperwork. "Mr. Rodriguez, the Army has an informant reward program for civilians who assist in national security investigations. Based on the significance of this case and your crucial contribution, you've been approved for a payment of $50,000. Tommy's mouth fell open. $50,000, more money than he had ever seen in his life. Enough to not just save his shop, but to expand it, modernize it, maybe even hire some help. "There's more," Colonel Williams continued. "We've been impressed with your mechanical skills and your ability to spot details that others miss. The Army base here in Arizona is looking for civilian contractors to maintain and service our vehicle fleet. If you're interested, we'd like to offer you a contract." Tommy couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You want to hire me? The base has over 300 vehicles that need regular maintenance. Trucks, cars, specialized equipment. It's steady work, good pay, and you'd still be able to run your private shop on the side." The gray-haired woman slid a contract across the table. "The initial contract is for 1 year, renewable based on performance. The monthly payment would be more than enough to cover your overhead and provide a comfortable living." Tommy looked at the contract, his eyes focusing on the monthly payment amount. It was 3 times what he usually made in his best months. Combined with the reward money, his financial problems would be completely solved. "I don't know what to say," Tommy managed. "This is incredible." "Say yes," Agent Park suggested with a smile. "You've earned it." Tommy signed the contract that afternoon. Within a week, he had paid his overdue rent, restocked his tool inventory, and even hired his neighbor's son Alex to help around the shop. The kid was 19, fresh out of high school, and eager to learn about cars just like Tommy had been at that age. The Army contract was everything Colonel Williams had promised. Tommy's first assignment was to service a fleet of military pickup trucks, routine maintenance that he could do with his eyes closed. But the pay was steady, the work was reliable, and best of all, it left him time to take on private customers too. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about Tommy's new success. People started bringing him cars they had been putting off, fixing because they couldn't afford it before. With his steady military income, Tommy could afford to be more flexible with payment plans for his regular customers. 3 months later, Tommy's shop was busier than it had ever been. He had installed new equipment, including a computerized diagnostic system that helped him work on newer cars. Alex had turned out to be a natural mechanic, with the same attention to detail that Tommy's father had taught him to value. One afternoon, while Tommy was working on a customer's sedan, Alex called out from across the garage. "Hey, Tommy, you ever wonder what happened to that red Mustang?" Tommy looked up from the engine he was working on. He thought about that beautiful car often. How perfect it had looked. How much craftsmanship had gone into making it appear completely normal while hiding its secret purpose. "Agent Park told me it's being kept as evidence until the trial," Tommy replied. "After that, who knows, probably end up in some government warehouse." "Seems like a waste," Alex said. "It was a beautiful car." "Beautiful on the outside," Tommy corrected. "But it was built for deception. Sometimes the prettiest things hide the darkest secrets." It was a lesson Tommy had learned the hard way. That gorgeous Mustang had taught him to look beyond appearances, to pay attention to details that didn't quite fit, to trust his instincts when something seemed too good to be true. 6 months after the whole adventure began, Tommy received a call from Agent Park. "Thought you'd like to know Robert Chen and his team were all convicted yesterday. They're going to prison for a long time." "Good," Tommy said. "What about the other stolen cars?" "We recovered all of them. Turns out they had a whole garage full of classic cars they had converted for surveillance work. Mustangs, Camaros, even an old Corvette. All of them looked perfect on the outside, all of them hiding military-grade communication equipment." Tommy shook his head in amazement. "How long were they doing this?" "At least 2 years, maybe longer. They were good at what they did. Too good. If you hadn't accidentally activated that device, they might still be out there." After hanging up, Tommy walked outside and looked at his thriving auto repair shop. The afternoon sun was setting behind the desert hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Cars were lined up in his lot waiting for service, and through the window he could see Alex learning to use the new diagnostic computer. A year ago, Tommy had been struggling to keep his doors open, counting crumpled bills, and worrying about rent. Now he had more work than he could handle, a steady income from the military contract, and enough money in the bank to sleep peacefully at night. All because he had been curious about a rattling noise in a beautiful red Mustang. Tommy often thought about the strange chain of events that had changed his life. If David Johnson or Robert Chen or whatever his real name was had taken his car to a different mechanic, none of this would have happened. If Tommy hadn't been so desperate for money, he might have asked more questions before accepting the job. If his elbow hadn't bumped that hidden device, the spy ring might never have been caught. Life was funny that way. Sometimes disaster and opportunity arrived in the same package, and you couldn't tell which was which until it was all over. As Tommy locked up his shop that evening, he noticed a classic car driving slowly past on the street. For just a moment his heart jumped. It looked like another perfect restoration, too perfect, too pristine. Then the car continued on its way and Tommy relaxed. Just a car enthusiast out for an evening drive, nothing more. But Tommy made a mental note to pay extra attention to any future customers who seemed too mysterious, paid in too much cash, or brought cars that were too perfect. Once was enough for a lifetime of adventure. He had learned that sometimes the best thing that can happen to a struggling mechanic is fixing the right car at exactly the right time, even if he doesn't know it at the moment. Especially then,